son that his father had killed himself, that he had shot himself in the head.
Being flexible with reality is a good way to describe Helen's attitude. She certainly turned facts on their heads when necessary.
Helen had made herself a new life, and at the center of it was her adorable and adored young son.
In the fashion of the time, he wore long bangs, and his mother dressed him in sailor suits. Even at the age of 3 or 4 or 5, there was a sort of melancholy in his eyes.
Although his mother was clearly in charge, over the years, George became very close to his stepfather.
George was crazy about him. They both loved to cook, and they would prepare these wonderful meals in their kitchen. As far as George was concerned, Frank Besselo was his real father.
In 1927, Frank formally adopted the teenager. George finally had a legal father, but in the eyes of his friends, he was still a mama's boy.
The young people didn't treat him very well a lot of the time. They took exception to the fact that he seemed to be kind of pampered and not very forceful. He kind of was a loner a bit.
But as he got older, that changed. In high school, George was popular, handsome, and athletic. He played football, performed in the school band, and sang in the choir.
He seemed to be pretty much the all-round student, except that his grades were never anything spectacular. And in fact, he talked throughout much of his youth about becoming a doctor. However, his teachers made repeated notes that he was going to have to improve his science scores.
Slowly, George's interest turned to acting. He loved going to movies, especially Rudolph Valentino films. All in all, it was a happy California adolescence. Then in 1929 came the great stock market crash. In the depression that followed, Frank Besselo's fortune suffered, and so did his marriage.
It doesn't seem completely coincidental to me that around this time, Helen started making her moves to separate from Frank.
Helen divorced Frank, and George was devastated. He tried to tell his mother that he really wanted to stay with his father.
But his mother convinced him that he needed to stay at home and go to school, and this is the way it was going to be. And she pretty much wore the pants in the family anyways, so whatever Mommy wanted, Mommy got.
By the time George graduated high school, he was 6'2" and 195 pounds. At Pasadena Junior College, he got interested in boxing, but Helen was determined to stop him.
We were told that she actually hired somebody to beat George up, to give him a taste of what it really feels like to get beaten, simply to beat the idea of becoming a professional boxer out of his mind.
This may never have happened, but George did give up boxing. He turned his attention to music and acting, joining the a cappella choir, playing guitar, and performing in school plays. In 1935, 21-year-old George joined one of the most prestigious theaters in the country, the Pasadena Community Playhouse. Although at first he didn't do much besides carry spears and appear in crowd scenes, George was happy.
The Pasadena Community Playhouse was the turning point in George's life, both in terms of his career, what he would be doing with the rest of his life, and also with his self-image.
From the beginning, George liked being on stage, and audiences liked watching him.
The first time I ever saw George do a play, I thought, he's going to be a big star someday. I was impressed. He was a charming, charismatic, talented man. Everybody loved him.
George soon became part of the group of good-looking young men who were favorites of Gilmore Brown, the openly homosexual founder of the Playhouse. They were known as Gilmore's Boys, and rumors flourished that George was gay. No one could ever offer any proof, but the rumors would never completely disappear. Over the next 4 years, George appeared in dozens of Playhouse productions. During the summers, he did summer stock.
Oh, we just had a ball. George was unselfish. He didn't care what part he played in the play, as long as it fit and everything went together.
By 1939, 25-year-old George Besselo had proved to be as popular with audiences as with his castmates. He was having the time of his life. Little did he know that life was about to get even better. He was about to be cast in one of the most popular movies ever made. You are watching George Reeves, part of 25-year-old George Besselo, was a popular but completely unknown actor at the Pasadena Playhouse. Then one night, casting agents for Hollywood producer David O. Selznick saw George and gave him his big break, a small role in a movie that would become legendary, Gone with the Wind. George was to play one of the Tarleton boys.
He told me that he had gotten the part, and he was tickled to death to be a part of Gone with the Wind because, as you know, I think everybody in America that could read had read that book.
George's brother was played by Fred Crane.
We were enough alike in size, and when they dyed our hair, we could pass for brothers. My first impression of the man was that he was a great person. I embraced him as a friend right away. We'd have fun.
The two young actors spent their money freely on good times.
I used to say we'd go out and throw our money in the air and run like hell so it wouldn't fall back in our pockets. We promptly were off to don the beachcombers, where we got absolutely stoned.
On screen, George and Fred were the perfectly sober suitors for Scarlett O'Hara's affections. Their big moment came in the film's opening scene.
Fiddly-dee. War, war, war. This war talk's spoiling all the fun at every party this spring. I get so bored I could scream. Besides, there isn't going to be any war.
Not going to be any war. Why, honey, of course there's going to be a war.
If either of you boys says war, just once again, I'll go in the house and slam the door.
But Scarlett,
Don't
honey.
you want us to have a war?
Wait a minute, Scarlett, honey, please. We're sorry.
Well, but remember, I warned you.
I've got an idea. We'll talk about the barbecue the Wilkses are giving over 12 Oaks tomorrow.
That's a good idea. You're eating barbecue with us, aren't you, Scarlett?
Well, I haven't thought about that yet. I'll think about that tomorrow.
And we want all your waltzes. First Brent, then me, then Brent, then me again, then so on.
Promise?
Well, I'd just love to. If only I didn't have every one of them taken already.
Well, honey, you can't do that to us.
Getting the role of Stuart Tarleton in Gone with the Wind was a promising start for George because it was such a big, important film. Everyone saw that film. And George felt that this was a good launching of his film career. And in fact, it was.
The studio was happy with George's performance, but studio head Jack Warner thought George's last name didn't look good on screen. Warner liked the way Reeves looked, so George Besselo became George Reeves. It wasn't just Reeves' career that was expanding. At the Pasadena Playhouse, he met and became intensely attracted to a young actress, Eleanora Needles.
They hit it off. George was dating a lot of people in those days, but Eleanora really caught his fancy, and he hers. They seemed to have been really devoted to each other.
In 1940, they married. Everyone, even Reeves' mother, liked Eleanora. The couple seemed to be a perfect match of opposites.
You never quite got to know Eleanor like you did George because she wasn't that open as a person. At the time, I thought they were a marvelous couple because he was the great charismatic and she was the one that kind of enjoyed it.
Reeves and Eleanora had dreams of becoming the new first couple of the American theater. But the contract he had signed with Warner Brothers kept Reeves working nonstop. He appeared in a succession of less than memorable films: Tear Gas Squad, Calling All Husbands, Ladies Must Live, and Hoppy Serves a Writ.
What's the idea?
It was nothing, Steve. I fell off my horse. I guess I fainted.
You're the second strangers we found on this range in less than a week.
George was busy, but he wasn't a star.
George was not the kind of dynamic character lead that Warner Brothers specialized in those days. He wasn't Paul Muni, he wasn't James Cagney or Bogart. I think that they just saw George as a competent, light leading man for lesser films and a competent supporting player for larger films.
In 1943, Reeves finally got his first starring role. In So Proudly We Hail, Reeves played a wounded soldier during the Second World War who falls in love with co-star Claudette Colbert.
So Proudly We Hail was probably, in some ways, the most important film of George's career. It was his first opportunity to shine in a large and prestigious role in a large and prestigious picture.
What are you doing?
You're going to have a bath and don't be coy.
I don't care how dirty I may be.
You reek. I can still smell that oil you were swimming in.
No female's going to bathe me.
Your mother did.
Only until I was big enough to knock her down.
Mm-hmm. He's immensely likable in that role. He's charming, he's flirtatious, he's brave, he's completely believable as the love interest. This, again, was a real showcase for him, and he felt that great things would come from it.
The film was a big hit at the box office, and the movie's director, Mark Sandrich, felt Reeves had the makings of a star. But World War II was raging, and Reeves put his career on hold to enlist in the Army. On the eve of his departure, Sandrich reassured him about his future in Hollywood.
One of the last things Mark Sandrich said to him was, "George, when you come out of the service, I'm going to make you a star." And George felt very optimistic about that and believed it.
29-year-old Reeves joined the Special Theatrical Unit of the U.S. Army Air Corps, and he appeared in several training films, including a forgettable role in a film on the dangers of venereal disease.
Yes, sir.
While Reeves was stationed in New York, theater director Moss Hart cast him in a small role in Winged Victory, a Broadway play. After its run, Reeves toured the country with the show. One night, he had a visitor backstage. His real father, Don Brewer, had tracked Reeves down.
When this gentleman introduces himself to George as Don Brewer, as his father, it's an incredible, stunning shock and surprise to this young actor who thought for a long time that his father had committed suicide.
Reeves was furious with his mother. For years afterward, he refused to speak to her, and their relationship never recovered from the strain. For Reeves and his biological father, too much time had passed. After that one time, the two men never saw each other again. In 1946, at the end of the war, 32-year-old Reeves returned home ready to make good on the stardom he'd been promised. But the man who'd made the promise, director Mark Sandrich, was dead.
I think that had a very dramatic effect on him, and he had a difficult time getting used to the fact that it could have been different if he didn't go to war. So he got stuck accepting whatever work would come along.
He did some low-budget pictures like Jungle Goddess, Thunder in the Pines. He did the Sam Katzman serial, The Adventures of Sir Galahad. But these were nowhere near the caliber of parts that he was getting before he went into the service.
His marriage wasn't faring any better than his career. In 1949, his wife left him for another man.
Either he caught her with someone or she caught him with someone. It was a combination of an unfortunate incident or that she simply found a better way of life through someone else.
The decade that had started with so much promise was turning into a disaster for Reeves, but his professional salvation was around the corner, television. The brand new medium was sweeping the nation.
The love was fated, you were created just for me.
And if the movies didn't want actors like Reeves, television did.
Television in the early 50s becomes a kind of elephant's graveyard for actors like George, who didn't quite make it as movie stars. It's a kind of refuge.
Television was above all family entertainment, and it didn't take long for producers to realize that comic book characters would appeal to kids, and one of the most popular was Superman. The Man of Steel had been a hit ever since his creation by two Cleveland, Ohio high school students, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. It took 5 years for them to sell their idea, but when Superman debuted as a newspaper comic strip in 1939, it was an instant success. It quickly became a comic book, a radio show, and then a hugely popular movie serial starring Kirk Allen. Television was the obvious next step, and George Reeves was the producer's immediate and unanimous choice for the role.
Big shoulders, that lantern jaw, upstanding, affable. They knew who their Superman was right away. Of course, the irony is they're thrilled, they have their Superman, but poor George really feels that he's kind of touched bottom.
The radio people would not even talk to the people that were into television, and of course the people that were in the full-length features, they were like the mega gods. That was taking a step down when you went into television at that time.
When he took the Superman part, he thought, as the other cast members did, who knew if this show was even going to be broadcast?
But the show would go on the air, and Reeves' life would never be the same.
Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's Superman.
In 1951, 37-year-old George Reeves completed filming the first 26 episodes of The Adventures of Superman. Here, brought to the screen, was Superman and his alter ego, mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent, his colleague Lois Lane, cub reporter Jimmy Olsen, and their boss at the Daily Planet, Perry White. The show was no triumph for George Reeves. He hoped Superman would die an obscure failure, and at first it seemed it might. For 2 years, the show sat on a shelf. Then Kellogg's agreed to sponsor it, and in February 1953, The Adventures of Superman finally debuted.
Yes, it's Superman, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Superman, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend steel in his bare hands.
It was, to everyone's surprise, an immediate and enormous hit. Superman was every child's fantasy, the hero with magical powers that every kid wants to be, and the all-powerful father every kid wants to have.
My partner went out the door as soon as the alarm went off. You don't have to worry about me, though. I'm not going to run away. You mean you deliberately stayed when you could have gotten away?
It was Superman mania. Within a week or two or three, suddenly they couldn't take a bus anywhere. They couldn't eat in a restaurant. People would be pointing and screaming and children gathering.
Something like 91% of households with kids under the age of 12 are tuned into this show. So it becomes instantly a national phenomenon. George had achieved on television something that had, in a way, eluded him all those years in the theater and in the movies. He had become a star.
But for Reeves, the stardom that came from Superman was a mixed blessing. He liked the steady paycheck and attention, but he didn't much like playing a comic book hero. He particularly disliked the Superman costume.
He always felt uncomfortable in the union suit, as he called it. But I can't blame him. He said, you know, what is the man my age doing running around in his underwear? You know, the woolies.
It was like a hair shirt to him. He was really suffering. Someone told me that every time he went under the lights in the woolen costume, he would lose about 20 pounds just in water and sweat.
In order to be Superman, Reeves had to dye his hair and wear rubber muscles. By the end of the series, although he worked out to stay in shape, he also had to wear a corset, which made him even more uncomfortable.
He got used to having to sit in front of an ice bucket with a fan blowing in between takes, and the rashes, and then having to wear the rubber latex muscles. It was very irritating for him at times. It was tough.
At the end of every season, Reeves would burn his costume in the parking lot.
He would take the Superman costume and pour gasoline on it and immolate it, really. Before he did that, he would cut out the emblem, the S, and give it away as a kind of keepsake.
But the millions of children who watched him knew nothing of the man behind the Man of Steel. They were in awe of a superhero.
I just thought he was the greatest thing. Bullets bouncing off, you know, trees, he could pull up stones. I mean, you know, who worries when Superman is in the world?
You think about his hand on hips, shoulders out kind of stance over the universe. He is Atlas, and he was sort of a good-looking, handsome, square-jawed, broad-shouldered, solid role model.
When Reeves made personal appearances, he was mobbed wherever he went. To his young fans, he was Superman, which sometimes proved a dangerous illusion. Legend has it that at one appearance, a boy tried to shoot Reeves with his father's pistol. Reeves talked him out of it, explaining that the ricocheting bullets might injure the ordinary mortals nearby.
There was a kind of inherent physical danger, I guess like being eaten alive by munchkins, that George Reeves had to deal with in his public appearances. In fact, it got so bad that he told the show's producer, I'll make public appearances, but I won't do it in my Superman suit anymore.
As an actor, Reeves felt limited by the role. Only rarely did he get an opportunity to try something new.
There's one episode called The Face and the Voice, in which he played a double character. They do plastic surgery to make somebody look like Clark Kent and Superman, and so he got to do a tough guy, and I knew that George had a lot of fun doing that and took it very seriously.
I ain't gonna do it.
But, Boulder, you just promised you would do it.
Well, all right, so I changed my mind already. I don't ain't gonna hurt. Yeah, that's right. How do I know I ain't gonna hurt?
$25,000. And don't be silly, you heard the doctor promise he wouldn't hurt you.
Yeah, now what if it don't work, though?
By the mid-1950s, the series was making a lot of money for its producers. Lunch boxes and Superman costumes were sold to children by the truckload. But for all the hoopla and success, Reeves never made much money from the adventures of Superman. At the height of the series' popularity, he was making only $2,500 a week and working hard for it. To keep costs down, 2 episodes were shot simultaneously and 12-hour days were the norm. Even so, the Superman unit got along well. The atmosphere on the set was lighthearted and the cast grew close. Reeves, despite his fame, never acted the star.
If he was in a situation where he saw a technician struggling with a light, he'd walk over in the suit and help the guy out. He was just one of the guys.
And off the set as well, Reeves became known for his generosity.
George used to put a sign on his dressing room door. It said, "Honest George, the people's friend." I think he gave away as much money as he earned.
He couldn't possibly have anything left of his meager salary the way he helped everybody. He was very generous, and he did a lot of work with children's groups.
This is a man who would go to hospitals in a costume he hated, but it didn't stop him from talking to little kids. Didn't stop him from holding patients who were dying.
But even Reeves' good nature had its limits. Always athletic, he did his own stunts, which were often primitive and dangerous. When a special effect didn't go as planned, he had to draw the line.
George was supposed to fly in, land in front of us, and wrap us in something and take Lois and Jimmy out. Well, the wire broke. And George, very irritated, got up and he said, "That's that." He said, "I don't fly on wires anymore."
I remember one time when we were standing there, no George, he got stuck in the wall, one hand, one foot.
I think it deepened the humiliation he was going through. I mean, this wasn't Shakespeare. This wasn't Clifford Odets. He was jumping out of fake windows onto mattresses and bending phony pieces of steel.
You're just wasting your ammunition, Blinky. Sit down. Hey, let me out. Let me out!
Despite his descent into kitsch, Reeves still had hopes of restarting his film career. In 1953, the chance to break free of Superman finally came. He was given a substantial role in From Here to Eternity, but the audience's reaction to him in previews caused the studio to rethink his role in the movie.
When George Reeves came on the screen, there were titters in the audience, and everybody in the industry was at that screening that night, and I saw the guillotine when I heard people yell out Superman. This was a disaster for George.
The studio cut Reeves' part drastically. He was left in only one scene critical to the movie's plot.
Lever tells me you've been eyeing the captain's wife like a hound dog at hunting time. He has, huh? What else did that character tell you? She took up with a lot of men back there at Fort Bliss. Well, I wouldn't put stock in stories like that. This ain't no story. But I was one of them myself.
It was the last major movie that George Reeves would ever appear in. Reeves was devastated. His once promising film career was over. If his professional future seemed drab, Reeves' personal life could not have been more colorful. In the early 1950s, he had fallen for Toni Mannix, a beautiful former Ziegfeld Follies showgirl. She was one of Hollywood's most flamboyant characters.
She was a broad. She was a New York Irish broad. I mean it in the best way. She was absolutely wonderful and fun, gorgeous, and the things she'd say were outrageous.
Toni was 10 years older than Reeves and much richer. She bought him his car, his clothes, and even the house he lived in Benedict Canyon.
Toni Mannix fell for George Reeves. And she, like Helen Besselo, was someone you didn't say no to. Toni pretty much turned George into a kept man.
It was an arrangement, but I don't think it occurred to George, and I don't think he felt any guilt. I don't think that he ever thought that he was kept by her. He certainly loved her. She called him the boy, and he called her Ma.
Besides money and age, there was another difference between the lovers. Toni was married, and her husband, Eddie the Bulldog Mannix, was one of the most powerful men at MGM. No one knew exactly what he did, but the rumor was that he was connected to the mob.
Eddie was a tough guy, and he had a kind of a shady past, and he had some ties in with organized crime, and he was a very feared individual by a lot of Hollywood people.
Eddie had a mistress of his own. He knew about Reeves and Toni, and he didn't mind. In fact, the relationship was an open secret in Hollywood. Reeves and Toni appeared together everywhere. Toni, who liked to keep a possessive eye on her boy, even brought his lunch to the set.
George drank. Toni Mannix would often bring him martinis at lunch, and work wasn't all that easy after he'd had a couple of martinis. And he would often say to me, "It's time for my olive." He would say, "I need my olive to go on with this."
Reeves may have hated the role of Superman, but he was trapped in it. After 6 seasons on the air, he had completely disappeared into the character. He couldn't find work out of costume in front of the cameras, so Reeves decided instead to work behind them as a director. In 1957, he directed the last 3 episodes of the season.
We were all very happy for him. We all worked very hard to be at our best for him. He was absolutely sure-footed as a director.
In November of 1957, production on Superman's 6th season wrapped up. Personally, Reeves was looking forward to traveling, and professionally, he was optimistic about finding more work as a director. It seemed that the worst might be behind him. Instead, the worst was just ahead. For 100 episodes of The Adventures of Superman, the last 3 of which he directed himself. Reeves had given up on getting other roles. His new ambition was to direct. At 43, Reeves was in the throes of a midlife crisis. His dreams had been unfulfilled, and his relationship with longtime girlfriend Toni Mannix was growing stale.
She begins, let's say, to look a little bit too much like his mother. He begins to recognize the fact that the several years he spent being Superman have pretty much ruined his chance at a film career.
Reeves had always been a heavy drinker. Now, as he grew depressed, he was drinking more than ever. Superman was over, and he was out of work. Although he was sick of playing the superhero, Reeves was tired of living off Toni and was running out of money. He reluctantly signed on to do a national wrestling tour as Superman. Then the following year, while on a trip to New York, Reeves met Lenore Lemon, and everything changed. Lenore was not just a breath of fresh air into his life, she was a tornado. Lenore was well known on the New York club scene. Tough and sexy, she could be counted on for 2 things, a bad temper and a good time.
Lenore Lemon was a wild, rich kid who grew up in New York. She was very attractive as a young woman. She loved to drink. If you wanted to have a good party, you would invite Lenore Lemon. She was a pistol.
Reeves was instantly attracted to her, a moth to a flame.
She just turned his head around, and I think she offered a kind of new lease on life.
He said, "The new woman, Lenore Lemon, makes me feel like a boy again." That's exactly what he said. "She makes me feel like a boy again."
And Lenore was just as attracted to Reeves.
As far as she was concerned, it was love at first sight. When they met in New York, he said, "Well, when you come out to California, you know, stop by, look me up." And a week later, she showed up with her suitcases, and that was it.
Getting into a relationship with Lenore had been easy. Telling Toni was hard. When Reeves told her their romance was over, Toni threw a fit.
Toni goes on the warpath herself. She's not going to surrender George to this New York interloper, this New York harpy, this whore, she calls her.
She called her a slut, and every other word you can conjure in your imagination with X rating. She went ballistic.
Toni didn't keep her feelings to herself. She began a campaign of harassment against Reeves and his new girlfriend.
Toni Mannix had hired someone to make harassing phone calls to the house where George and Lenore lived.
I think she even steals George's one-eyed pet schnauzer, plucks him right up out of the back seat of his convertible, and steals him. I think has the dog put down, actually.
There was a very close call in George's sports car. He hit the abutment of a bridge and suffered a concussion, and it was found that the brakes had been tampered with.
Tony's harassment took its toll on Reeves. He was afraid of what she might try next. In March of 1959, Reeves filed a complaint with the Los Angeles district attorney against his former lover. But nothing Tony did could put a stop to his new affair. Reeves was completely infatuated with his new love. Even his old friends now bored him. The people who were used to seeing him once a week weren't seeing him at all.
Suddenly, Lenore's friends are Reeves' new friends. And where before, certainly it was drinking in the evening with guitar playing, singing, laughing, joking. Now it's full-on party time. The house is a full-on party house. The booze bill is up to a couple $100 a week.
Reeves and Lenore were running through money like crazy, and without Tony's support and his Superman paycheck, Reeves was soon broke. Another 26 episodes of Superman were under discussion, and Reeves found himself actually looking forward to the possibility. Reeves was getting more and more tired of the scene Lenore had created. He began to miss the stability of his relationship with Tony.
He was confused about his love life. I mean, here he had this long affair with Tony. Everything was in her name. Leonora Lemon comes along, and the gravy train doesn't stop here anymore. He owed a lot of money.
But no one would ever know how things between Reeves and Lenore might have turned out. On June 15th, 1959, the couple went out to eat at one of their favorite restaurants. Over dinner, they were seen arguing. After they returned home to Benedict Canyon, some friends and neighbors dropped by for drinks. Around midnight, Reeves went upstairs to sleep, while Lenore and their guest stayed downstairs. Nobody has ever known exactly what happened next, but later, Lenore would tell the police that she and her friends heard a gunshot and ran upstairs to find Reeves dead. He was lying naked on the floor in a pool of blood, a bullet hole in his brain, and a Luger by his feet. The police called it a suicide. When the news that Superman had killed himself broke, America was shocked, especially his millions of young fans. Ironically, even in death, it was Superman they mourned.
It was devastating. Well, I got to tell you that there's a lot of kids that were growing up at that time that knew exactly what they were doing the day Superman died.
I remember going to school that day, and it was like being in the Valley of Zombies. It was either crying or stone-faced astonishment.
There's a photograph in one of the newspapers, maybe the LA Times, showing a forlorn-looking little boy sort of saying, "Say it ain't so."
The country had a simple, sad explanation. George Reeves had been so typecast as Superman, he could get no other work, and it had killed him. But before long, rumors surfaced that Reeves' death was not a suicide, which raised one big question. If George Reeves did not kill himself, then who did? 1955 and 1959 stunned his friends and millions of fans. The press treated the story as a bizarre mystery, inventing theories and printing rumors that quickly spread. Even before the police could complete their investigation, rumors were circulating that Reeves had thought he really was Superman and had jumped out a third-story window and tried to fly, or that he had been trying to demonstrate that bullets did bounce off him. But many of those who knew Reeves found it hard to believe he had killed himself and felt the Los Angeles Police Department's investigation left more questions than answers.
No one checked to see whether there was any gunpowder residue on George's hand. No one seemed to think it was odd that there were no fingerprints on the gun. And no one checked to see whether there was any gunpowder tattooing on George's temple, which would have told police whether the gunshot was at a point-blank range.
Over the next few months, there were other questions raised and left unanswered. Reeves' body had been found with fresh bruises, as if he had just been in a fight. Where had they come from? Why was there no suicide note? Why was he naked? And most troubling of all, there was no explanation for the 2 additional bullet holes found in the floor of his bedroom. Despite the questions, the police decided that Reeves had killed himself, but not everyone was willing to go along with that conclusion. Many of his fans and friends continued to believe that Reeves was not a suicide.
Yeah, as long as I live, I will say he did not do it because he had too much to live for. George was fun. He had lots of love in front of him. He had 2 women fighting over it.
What more could a man want? There were several scenarios the non-believers thought plausible. Some of his friends came to believe that Reeves was shot during an argument with Lenore Lemon. When Lenore told police she had predicted to her guest that Reeves would kill himself that night, was she simply covering up her own crime?
My feeling is that George tried to back out of the engagement. He didn't want to get married, and she grabbed the gun out of the dresser while George was in the shower, and George tried to take a gun away from her. A fight ensued. They fell. The gun went off.
Then there were those who believed that Tony Mannix had hired someone to kill Reeves.
You've heard the expression, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Tony Mannix was so incensed and hurt. This was her ultimate revenge and the final escalation of her pattern of stalking and harassment.
Still, there were those who went along with the official version.
I had always felt that it was suicide. I was sure. It didn't surprise me that George couldn't face doing 26 more Superman shows. By that time, his hair was white. He had black his hair. His body was a bit out of shape. I thought the whole thing was probably depressing to him.
However George Reeves died, his violent, sudden death stunned the world. The three women he left behind were never the same.
Tony Mannix wound up a character like Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, sitting alone in her Hollywood mansion, occasionally with a paid male escort. She was a haunted woman.
George's mother grieved for years. Her house in Pasadena was like a shrine to George, as the story goes. Photos of him everywhere. Supposedly, she even burned an eternal flame on the piano.
Leonore Lemon had been tainted as the woman who might have killed Superman. She was no longer beautiful. She was really reduced to picking up men in second-rate hotels.
40 years after his mysterious death, George Reeves continues to fascinate us. The adventures of Superman can still be seen around the world. Fresh books are coming out. And numerous websites are devoted to preserving his memory. There's even talk in Hollywood about turning Reeves' life into a movie. Little could George Reeves have imagined the loyalty he would inspire in an entire generation of children, or that he would become a pop culture icon who lives on forever in the flicker of television.
I think the fact that George Reeves died so soon after the end of the run of Superman means that he will always be that person, that Superman that we knew. He remains very fresh and very pure in a way.
We all want to fly away from our problems. We all want to stand upright and strong in front of whatever enemies come toward us, and we can't do most of those things. And that's what a fantasy life provides us. And for the baby boom generation, George Reeves was that personification.
In the aftermath of his death, the person who pursued the murder angle most strongly was his mother, Helen Besselo. She refused to have his body interred after the funeral and hired a legendary defense attorney turned private eye, Jerry Geisler, to pursue the case. Geisler dropped the case abruptly, some say, for fear of what he'd discovered. And after 3 autopsies, the body of George Reeves was finally put to rest. The mystery of his death, though, is still very much with us. Tomorrow